Good evening and welcome back to another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio and now powered by our first sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You have to buy tires from somebody. You might as well buy them from us and help fund the movement, help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement, and that's exactly what the establishment means to take from you now. I am your host, Royce White, here in the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota, for episode number 54. Episode number 54. This is going to be another great family and friends episode. Our guest today is none other than the Hall of Fame NBA referee Kenny Mauer. Kenny Mauer, as I said on Wednesday night, hails from my own hometown here in Minnesota, St. Paul, which is our capital. We come from the same neighborhood in St. Paul, the Rondo neighborhood, which is a historic neighborhood. And Kenny Mauer is a great friend of my grandfather and my uncle and my great-grandfather from the St. Paul sports community, of which Kenny had great and iconic success as being an NBA official for over 35 years. In recent years, he ran into huge controversy with the NBA over their vaccine mandate, of which he denied under religious beliefs. And he filed what you would call an exception, an exception for or a religious exemption, of which he was denied by the NBA and continues to be denied to this day. And now his pension is under attack, and he has not been able to finish out his NBA career as an NBA as a referee. And again, he is a Hall of Fame NBA official. You can look up games of him or pictures of him right there with all-time NBA greats like Michael Jordan, Reggie Miller, so on and so forth. So without further ado, the great Kenny Mauer. Welcome, Kenny Mauer, to Family and Friends, the Family and Friends episode for this week of Please Call Me Crazy. We're happy to have you. It's an honor to be able to interview you. I told the audience a little bit of a backstory about our hometown connection. You being from the Rondo community, tragically we had to bury my great uncle Stephen, who I'm sure you probably know from the neighborhood, is the younger brother of my grandfather Frank and his brother Lewis, also known as Junior. My great grandfather Lewis White's uh, second son, middle son. So we had to bury him, and just being back in the old neighborhood in St. Paul and Rondo made me think about you. And we had already talked about doing the interview this week, and I thought it'd be a great way to tie in a lot of the things we've been talking about lately, whether it be the MLB and the sort of pride politics that were going on there, some of the NBA stuff, a lot of the vaccine stuff and COVID stuff that still lingers on. And your story is a great one that sort of encapsulates a lot of that. And we have that hometown connection. So it's just a greatly timed opportunity to have you on the show and introduce you to our guests. Before we get into all of that, we always like to go back and let our guests introduce themselves and give a little bit of their backstory, so you're not just popping up out of nowhere on our guests. We like to give them some context as to who you are, who you were growing up, and things like that. So if you can, just to start us off here, take us back to the beginning, Kenny Mauer and Rondo, St. Paul, whether you were born there. Now, whatever it is, take us back to the beginning and lead us up until, let's say, right up until the beginning of your professional career as what would become a Hall of Fame referee career.
Well, first of all, it's great to be with you, Royce. And yes, you covered a lot of it. I mean, this is the first time I've ever done an interview from someone that's actually from my hometown and grew up in my hometown. So when I'm speaking of some of the things, usually I sometimes forget when I do an interview that people think they know what I'm talking about, and they really don't know what the Lower East Side or Rondo or what Selby and Dale and what all that means. And here now I'm talking to you, and although we've become friends, it's fun to. And if you can correct me, or we can have fun with it too, because I've lived there, most of my life. But yes, I grew up in St. Paul, and I'm very proud of that. When we grew up, a lot of people would say Twin Cities, or they'd say we were from Minnesota. I would always say I'm from St. Paul. I was proud to be from St. Paul. I was proud of Dave Winfield and Steve Winfield. I was proud of Jack Morris. I was proud of Paul Molitor. I was proud of my cousin Joe. I was proud of of myself and my brothers and my father and my uncles and all the great people. It's a very tight knit community, but people don't know that. It's I mean, if you're any kind of an athlete and you're from St. Paul, you probably know who that other athlete is. If not, then you're probably not an athlete. I mean, I've followed your career, and people in sports have followed your career, and some people graciously have followed me, and all the other people that I've just brought up. But it all stemmed from our fathers and our grandfathers and
Yeah.
people within the community. And I used to go watch my father play city league basketball when he was in his 50s in the Rondo area, it's so. I mean, it's a great place to have grown up at. I will get into it, but I'm a little heartbroken and a little bit miffed and really troubled as to what our beautiful state and beautiful Twin Cities are turning into now, and
Yeah.
we can certainly talk about that. And
Yeah.
but no, I was a kid that grew up. Really, I grew up over in Inver Grove Heights, moved to St. Paul early in my teens, and I wanted to play football for my father. My father was the head football coach at Humboldt for years over on the west side.
Yep.
And you know where that is. And he would play against Central. We'd play games at Central Stadium. I've been to Central Stadium so many times and loved it. Had so many great memories there. But my father always wanted to coach at a large school. And at the time, back in the late 60s, early 70s, Harding was one of the largest schools in the state of Minnesota. I mean, it literally had over 700 children, 700 kids, I should say, in the senior class. So my dad wanted to go there. He always wanted to coach at a big school. And so our family moved there in the early 70s, and I played football, which was one of the greatest experiences of my life for my father, my senior year. And then my brothers and my sister, they all continued to have their entire 3-4 years at Harding High School. So I grew up there, and I loved it, and I loved growing up on the east side of St. Paul. I loved growing up in Minnesota, the change of seasons. I've always hated weather. I've always hated winter. I love snow, but I hate winter. And but I have so many dear friends back there. I still go back there. I currently reside in Florida now. I live in Fort Myers, Florida, but I still kept a home up in Afton, Minnesota, and I go up there and spend 4 to 5 months up there every year, and love it. Love to see the people that I grew up with, and I still have fond memories of that. And then, probably I was playing baseball at the University of Minnesota my sophomore, junior, and senior year, and I took a class in officiating. In fact, I took it at my freshman year when I was at a junior college called Anoka Ramsey, and I just fell in love with refereeing, Royce. I knew that I probably wouldn't be good enough to be the high level basketball player that I dreamed to be. I was this 5'11" white boy who couldn't jump, and I'm supposed to be able to play against the greatest athletes in the world. So I was smart enough to realize that I probably wouldn't reach the levels, although I love to play. And then I said, well, you know what? I love the game, and it's either you coach or you referee. And I said, my dad refereed, and he coached, and I used to go watch him when I was a little kid. I used to go to all the colleges around the area, Augsburg and Hamlin and St. Thomas, and then I'd go to Eau Claire, and I'd go to all these different schools. I go up to North Dakota State, North Dakota U. They all,
Yep.
you know what I'm
Yep.
talking about. I used to watch my dad. I used to sit in the crowd and watch them. All these people were yelling at my dad. They
Used to
were calling
watch him
everything.
officiate. It's funny you say that.
Sure.
I got to see I spent a little bit of time with my grandfather Frank, and he and I had a little bit of friction in the last year since I ran as Republican little inside family baseball there. We became a little we have different political views somewhat. I mean, in some ways the same, in some ways they're vastly different. But anyway, I learned so much about the game. I would actually say that the cerebral part of my basketball game really was cultivated on the road, up there in Northfield, up there in Moorhead, driving to the games with him and my uncle Junior or Steve or Peterson or whoever it may be, and watching them ref.
Sure.
Some of those blood feud small town rivalries in some of those schools out there in the rural Minnesota, and also some of the D2 and D3 college games as well. And it's just such a huge part of my basketball development. It's why I give referees so much shit today, because I come from the background. But I know that childhood well. It's like a spitting image of how I came up. What you're talking about.
Well, in fact, Frank was at I have a Christmas party this year, and I hope you'll join. I hope you'll come next year. But I invited Frank and Steve. Steve couldn't make it, but Frank, he's one of my favorite people in the world. I have so much respect for him, and he's such a fine man. Him and his wife. But Frank and I differ a little bit, as you well know, on politics as well too. His heart is in the right place. I think most people are, but it's just they differ a little. But again, that's what we're going to talk about. That's
Yeah.
okay. It's
Yeah.
okay to differ, but hopefully in the whole
And
scheme of
this
things.
is sorry, I'm sorry to cut you off, but
Go ahead.
this
Go ahead.
I'm thinking about this now. One of the things I want to ask you about that was on my mind last night when I was thinking about this interview is, from my vantage point, growing up in St. Paul where we grew up, it and just in thinking about the fact that you and Steve and Dave and my grandpa Frank and Billy Peterson and all of these historic and iconic sports figures from our hometown, which are very iconic on a statewide basis in many respects. I mean, Dave is quite arguably one of the best athletes in American history, let alone our little great small town. But thinking about the racial dynamic, which has become such a huge wedge issue in politics, I just feel like I came from a city, I came from a town, I came from a neighborhood where the elders, the people that helped raise me, the people that I grew up looking up to, didn't have this sort of racial division that has become so prominent during my youth. I would say in the 90s and 2000s, you started to see the racial narrative in the mainstream media kick back up. But talk about what it was like growing up in the 70s and 80s in a place like Rondo from a racial, what I want to call it, a race relation standpoint. It was pretty diverse and everybody seemed to get along in St. Paul, right?
Well, again, I think, Royce, that's the great thing about sports. And I know people that don't take part in sports, they don't understand what you and I are going to talk about in the next, whatever, 10, 15 minutes. When I was growing up and I played sports, when I looked at the young man across from me, and when I was competing, whether it be basketball or football, did I know that the man was black or Mexican? I grew up primarily on the west side of St. Paul. West side of
Mexican,
St. Paul, you all know, was all Mexican.
all
A lot
Mexican.
of Mexican people. They're my dearest friends to this day. I go over there. They're and we never thought. I never thought. I mean, did I know he was Mexican? Of course I did. I'm not stupid. Did I know the man was black? Of course I did. I'm not stupid. I admired the black man or the Mexican kid or whatever for his toughness or for how good they were. And I wished I could be that good. And I never once thought, well, I don't like him because of the color of his skin. Again, that's so media based. It's so political. We were kids. All
Yeah.
we did was play sports. I mean, I blocked for the guy that ran the fullback up the middle, or I threw a pass to Louis White, who could outrun most guys, and he was my dear friend. And I didn't give a hoot in hell about. I never have. And I learned when I was growing up, that's not a pretty black girl. That's a pretty girl. That's not a great black athlete. Wow, that guy's a great athlete. And that's how we grew up. That's how I grew up. My father coached all these kids. I mean, what? He used to kick them. He kicked them all in the pants. He didn't care whether they were white or black, or whatever. And that's, I think, Royce, it's so great you brought that up because I think it's so important in sports. People that don't play sports don't understand what you and I are talking about. I'd call a foul on you. Do you think I call a foul on you because you were black? I
Right.
mean, I don't even address it, Royce. I don't even give it credence. It's just like with the transgender and all the things we're going to get into. I don't even acknowledge it because it's so far out of my way of thinking and scope and reality. And so, again, it's certainly multiplied. But for you and I growing up where we did, with the parents and the grandparents that we did,
Yeah.
well, you come to my party, Royce, and you'll see
Yeah.
it really doesn't matter. And it's all about taking care of your fellow man. And Frank White has done more things for me than I will ever be able to do for him. So uh, I don't really, color of skin never has mattered to me.
I mean,
And I think it's because of my family, my father, my mother. And I
yeah.
think it's because of growing up in sports and either winning or losing because I was better or I was not as good as the man across from me. And it didn't matter the color of the skin.
And I mean, absolutely. And it's funny. It's funny because but when when you're in politics like I am, I've chosen the path, so I don't complain about it at all. I mean, it's the game that I'm in, and I hope that I can contribute in a way where it will become less of a game and more of just an honest discussion about where we are and also people's history. And so, from my vantage point, it's just like growing up around my grandfather, and again, my grandfather's a Hall of Fame Minnesota High School League referee, right? He's on the Minnesota High School board. He's on the board for the Minnesota State High School League, and he played as well, but he also ref D2, D3, and all of those things. So, he's a huge figure in Minnesota sports himself. But even growing up with him when he worked for the Richfield Recreation and Parks, he was on the board for Richfield.
I remember.
Yeah, Richfield was predominantly the board, the recreation, the administration was primarily white. He was one of the only black guys that worked there. So I grew up
Hmm.
around a lot of white adults with
Hmm.
work parties. Or I remember I used to go over to Richfield, his little office there at the Recreation Parks and Board, a home office, and I grew up there. I used to sit there, and the women, the little old white ladies that did their arts and crafts and recreations at the recreation park home office used to know me, and I'd run around and they'd hand me candy, or I'd run around in the back in the field, and then we'd have all of these the holiday festivities that the recreations put on. My grandfather was instrumental in the July 4th celebration that would happen in Richfield every year, the parade, the
Sure,
fireworks, the whole deal. But then
I
there was
remember.
there was an Asian community there in Richfield that would come and use the back area in the office to break dance. And I grew up around some of the Asian kids that used to break dance, and some of the Latinos in Richfield. So I just grew up in this, in what I'm very proud and happy and fortunate and blessed was a very diverse childhood, multicultural in the best of ways. And maybe I'm fortunate just because of who my family was and who my grandfather was, and the uniqueness of where I grew up and how I grew up. But it just lent to me that, yeah, there's some racial issues out there. There's racism out there. But there is a way for us to live together in a multicultural way that's fruitful and positive and loving and based on genuine community. And mostly what I've started to see growing up into my adult years is that the racial narrative, with all of the merit it may have historically, institutionally, certainly from a Democrat Party standpoint and how they put us on the welfare state and so many other pernicious policies towards black people and minorities. But all in all, these racial narratives from a media standpoint have been meant to divide us. Because I grew up knowing a guy like Kenny Mauer, and never once, when I heard the name Kenny Mauer, I mean, this man, you guys have to understand, is revered. I grew up with a ref family. Okay, this guy is the cream of the crop when it comes to refs from our hometown. The longest tenured NBA ref in NBA history. So when you hear Kenny Mauer, it's a name that's on a pedestal. Never once when you hear the name Kenny Mauer did you think, oh, he's the white guy. You just think Kenny Mauer, the Hall of Fame badass referee, right? Who's had those moments and those pictures and those calls and those games with greats like Michael Jordan, or from Michael Jordan to everybody else you could think of. So that's just how I grew up, and I'm sure that it's the same with you. Let's shift gears a little bit back to sports for a moment. Tell me about your initiation into refereeing and how it sort of grew to the professional level.
Okay. Um, good. I wanted to speak on that. So I took this class when I was a freshman in college, and I fell in love with it, Royce. I said, wow, back then I was playing, so I still wanted to play as long as I could. But I realized, and it helped me, it instilled in me that how long do you think you can play at a competitive level? I mean, I would ask you that. What would you say? 34,
To
35, 36?
third,
You know,
now my generation, I would say you
yeah.
can probably go to about 38, maybe
Okay.
maybe
Yeah.
40 if you're very fortunate. Most guys only go to about 33.
That's what I said. You're going to get your exceptions, your Robert Parishes and your LeBrons and your, Kobe's. You're going to get 30, 40.
Vince
But the
Carter,
average,
Jason Kidd, Dirk, D
yeah,
Wade, some of these guys
but you're probably saying, I think we agree, 33, 34. Well, how long do you think you can referee at the NBA level?
till you're 70.
60 till you're 70. Exactly. So I knew that early on. If I can't stay in shape and if I keep my body right and I do the right things, which I've worked so hard to do, the way I try to stay nutrition, all that, I can do that for a long time. So I took this class and I fell in love with it. And
Mm.
I was still playing ball at a competitive level, but I knew this was something that I think I can maybe make a livelihood out of. So, that was my freshman year. Started refereeing B squad games and high school games with all the people that we've talked about. I'd do my dad's B squad game, and then my dad would do the varsity game. And then a couple years later, I was doing my varsity games with my dad. And I'll tell you something, Royce, one of the greatest thrills of my life, and listeners probably aren't going to even understand this, but you are, is that they would all, one of the greatest matchups in Minneapolis at the time was when Minneapolis North played Minneapolis Central. Remember those days years ago? I mean, you were
I was young.
much younger than me.
When
So yes, so
in my generation, it became Minneapolis Henry versus Minneapolis North. But
there you go.
before it was Henry, it was Minneapolis Central. That was the big rival.
That's absolutely. And now there's not even a Minneapolis Central. It's not
Yeah.
even that. But that was the big game every year. And the athletic director, um, when I in the summers of when I was trying to become a better referee, I would go live on the south side of Chicago. And I live with a man, his name is Reuben Norris.
Mm.
He's a black man who's very well respected in the city of Chicago. He used to run the park and rec. He was like my second father. And I used to go and stay with him and his wife. His wife was a saint, letting me sleep on their fold-out couch in the living room. And I would go over there and I would spend my summers in Chicago. You know, I'd go to 16th and Holman. I'd go to Cabrini Green. I'd go to all these places where there's some black referees that wouldn't go there. And I would go there, call it naivety, call it stupidity. I don't care. That's where the best basketball in the world was played, next to Harlem probably, and the Rucker League in Philly. And I wanted to go referee these games. So I went there, and Reuben used to take me there. I mean, Reuben probably had a firearm in his back trunk for all I knew. I mean, he was always protecting me.
Yeah.
But I would go and referee these games, Royce, and I'd be in 16th and Holman. That's where Mark Aguirre and Sonny Parker and Isaiah Thomas grew up. That's how I met them. And before they even got in the league, and there'd be gunshots like 6 blocks down and people would, and I'd be refereeing an outdoor basketball game, and the game would just keep playing. I'd keep refereeing. There'd be gunshots from down 2 blocks down. There'd be some whatever. I don't know what was being raided. Wasn't, but and I'd be hearing gunshots, and I just still referee because that's what I was there for, and that was part of life. And they took me into their way of life. I'd go over and I'd visit these homes that were so decrepit, and these mothers would take me in their home, and I didn't even know what grits was back then. I had no idea what grits were, and they'd feed me, and I actually loved it. I thought it was great, green beans and grits, all this. And they'd hug me, and I, and so that's how I grew up. That's how I started refereeing, Royce. That's how I started. And then when I'd come back in the winters, I would referee with my father that great Minneapolis Central, Minneapolis North game. Royce, there probably wasn't 2 other white people in the gym. You've been there. You know what I'm saying.
No, it's a neighborhood affair. I mean, it's straight up.
I didn't
It's
care.
the pride. It's the pride of the neighborhood, and both towns have both schools have their rivalry and their alumni, and it's just packed to the rafters. In the later years, in my years, with all honesty, in my years coming up, the Minneapolis North and Minneapolis Henry, and for all those out there who may not know, but may be somewhat of sports savants, the Minneapolis Norths have produced basketball legends from a Minnesota standpoint, like Khalid Al-Amin and Cameron Taylor and Kevin Henderson and many others. Minneapolis Henry produced people like Lawrence McKenzie and Johnny Gilbert and Terry Pettis, who unfortunately got himself in some trouble at Fresno State and is now serving a life sentence. That's an entirely different story. But
what a great player he was.
He would have been in the NBA for sure. Would have been in the NBA for sure.
No question.
But those games in my era were just as much heralded, you could say, or spoken about for the chance that a fight or two could potentially break out at those games, as well as how competitive they were, right? But that was my era. In your era, I think it was much different. I think the neighborhood was just different when you started reffing there than even in the 90s and 2000s.
I think you're right, but I think there was always the threat of that. But there was very little police around. You couldn't even get in the gym. There were people that were waiting outside. But the point I'm making is my father and I were refereeing the game, and we were two white men.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't matter, Royce. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I think they knew my father. They respected my father over the years, and me. But it was an honor to ref it. And Mr. Bill McMore was the athletic director then. He's an icon in the Minneapolis public school system. And I used to write him letters when I used to sleep on Ruben's couch in the summer and tell him the experiences that I was experiencing. And I would go to these homes and I'd referee in Cabrini Green. And look what I did today, Mr. McMore. And I tell him all the things that I was experiencing as a white kid. And I was so fortunate to be able to do that. And I never once thought, I'm not stupid, but I never once thought racially. I always thought I get to referee these guys, and Ricky Green and Sonny Parker and Isaiah Thomas and all these guys in Chicago State, and I'm refereeing all these guys. And Michael would come and play. That's when he was just starting, and I'm refereeing, and there's 6,000 people at Chicago State, and it was an honor. And I never once I swear to God, I never once thought racially in a negative standpoint about a call, about a person, about whatever. Hey, there were jerk off white guys and there were asshole black guys. I mean, no question.
The crowd's gonna think the audience gonna think that's funny, or some type of St. Paul thing that you use the word jerk off, because I do a lot. They all think it's hilarious.
But my way of explaining that there's bad people everywhere. And
no doubt.
But anyway, I'm so glad you asked me the question, because that's how I started, and that's how I came into being the person, or the referee. I like to think person. And then one thing led to another. The summer leagues in Chicago taught me how to referee. And by the time then I would referee small college. And then I never really wanted to referee big college, Royce. My dream was always to be an NBA referee. I hopped in my Volkswagen when I was 23 or 24 years old, and I went to Malcolm X Junior College to referee an NBA pro-am, it was a camp. And I drove my car there. I parked my Volkswagen, and my brother and I went in there. And again, multicultural everywhere. I just felt so at home. I loved it because of the way I had been brought up. It didn't bother me. I wasn't, I would give technical fouls in gymnasiums where I didn't know what the heck was going to happen. Ruben used to think it was the greatest thing in the world. He used to think, look at this white guy's giving technical fouls, and most guys would be scared to death. And I was too dumb, Royce, to be scared. I was too naive to be scared. Yeah. And I didn't think about that like we think now.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate, because that's what made me, I like to think, the man, but the person I was as a referee. So then, the summer leagues took place with the NBA, and then I spent 6 years there refereeing in every small town, Lima, Ohio, and Oshkosh, Minnesota. You've heard of them.
Yeah.
Lacrosse had a great team. I used to love to drive down there. I'd go up to Alaska. I was in Wyoming. I was out the east, Atlantic City. And then when I was 30 years old, I was fortunate to get a call from the head man, the supervisor officials, and Rod Thorne was his name. You know the name Rod Thorne.
Yeah, I know Rod.
And Rod has become, I'll never forget him, because he hired me. He hired Steve Javy and I when I was 30 years old. And it was a great day. I remember the phone call, remember where I was. And that's what started my NBA career.
For time's sake, in terms of just setting the stage for people, what year is this when you start reffing your first NBA games?
I was in 1980. I got hired in October of 1986.
So for the audience out there, this is 6 years before I was born. This is 5 or 6 years before I was even born. This guy.
You're making me feel a little old now, Royce.
This guy was reffing NBA games 3 years before I was even 4 or 5 years before I was even born. Amazing, incredible.
I started in the minors in the CBA, of which you know what that means, CBA,
Yep.
The Old Eastern League. I started in like the 79-80 season. So I refereed 6 years in the minors, and then I got hired in 86. Correct.
And another thing that dawns on me now is, if you ask anybody around the league, if you ask the players, if you know the players, Kenny is highly respected as an official for being what you would call, I guess you could call a player's official, somebody that the players could talk to, somebody that a lot of the players developed good relationships with. I know you have great relationships with a number of players away from the game in many ways. Obviously, now hearing your story, it's clear how you were able to form such great relationships with a lot of these players coming up the way you did. How, just briefly, tell me a little bit about developing some of those relationships, how you went about officiating, how you looked at officiating. Obviously, the game is a huge game with huge stakes. It's gotten huge over the years. The more commercialized it got, the more people bet money on it, the more invested everybody became, companies, so on and so forth. How did you approach the game in a way that allowed you to stay in the game and earn the respect of the players and develop good relationships with the players on the court?
Well, I think the thing that I learned early on is when I watched the referee early on, the best referees were the referees that controlled games. You're going to miss calls, Royce. I'm sorry. I mean, you can put a hand up in the air and you can put a hand by the elbow 3 times. And if you don't have the right angle, I can't tell whether or not Thompson or Curry got hit in the elbow or not. I have to be in the perfect angle to be able to see that. So the idea of a referee getting every play right in a game, it's not going to happen. And I think, although I tried, I knew that early on. But I knew from the Earl Stroms, the Daryl Garrettsons, the Jake O'Donnells, the referees that I came up under, that if you don't manage a game, then you're never going to be successful. And managing a game usually meant giving technical fouls. So if you were willing to manage the game and put your ass on the line and give technical fouls, then in the long run, you probably will gain respect. Now, again, you got to get a few plays right. That doesn't mean I'm missing 20 plays and I'm giving technical fouls on 20. If you go back and look, did I miss plays? Absolutely. And if I did miss plays, I would get to that player sometime during the next 6, 8, 10 minutes and say, hey, at the free throw line, taking the ball out of bounds, going back to the huddle. We all have our times. Hey, listen. Hey, Jason, I kicked the hell out of that play. I missed the play. I know I missed the play. I looked at it at halftime. I just wanted you to know, man. And when you admit that and let them know that you're not perfect. Early on in my career, I was too busy giving technical fouls. They would have veteran referees that would make a call, Royce, and running down the floor, the Larry Smiths and the Cotton Fitzsimmons and the Bill Fitches of the world would yell at me. And I'd say, I'm wet behind the ears. I'm about 165 pounds. That guy's 230, and it's Bill Sar, and you're yelling at me. Why are you yelling at me? And that was part of what? Being accepted. They didn't accept me yet. They didn't know who the heck I was. I wasn't even going to be around next year. But then if you give technical fouls and you throw, then they start realizing, well, you know what? He's taking money out of my pocket, and he may not be right, but he's not afraid. And then they start to let you referee, and then they start to accept you. Then they start coming up to you and calling you by your first name. It's no longer, hey, kid, or what's your name, or hey, Mauer. It's, hey, Kenny, can I talk to you? Absolutely, Jimmy. Come here. What do you want? And then you build. So was I good at it my first few years, Royce? No, I wasn't good at it at all. I wasn't good at it. But then as I became accepted, and as I told them, I'm either going to get fired or I'm going to be accepted, Steve Javy and I would talk, during the week and say, we're either going to get fired or we're going to have long careers. And thankfully, the Daryl Garrettsons of the world like strength, and the players started saying, hey, this guy likes clothes. He slicks back his hair. He shines his shoes. He likes music. He ain't a bad guy. And he's getting a few plays right. Let's talk to him. And I think that's how, then later in my career, Royce, I gave much less technical foul. I didn't have to give. One year, Royce, I gave 75 technical fouls through 13 coaches and almost got fired. Oof. So, I mean, because they didn't like that, but then again, they did like that. And when you go back and look at, why is he giving the technical fouls? We wish he wouldn't, but on the other, I threw Larry Brown out of 4 straight games. 4 straight games, I threw him out. He hated me. And to this day, we laugh at each other. I said, Larry, you made me better. You made me better. What he called Gary Payton. You made me better. Rasheed Wallace, you made me better. Royce White, you made me better. Because when I'd come to referee these guys that say, hey, man, I got to strap it on tonight. I mean, these guys are coming at me, and I'm going to strap it on, and I'm not going to give them one reason. Well, it didn't always happen that way, and after a while, and now those players are assistant coaches. Yeah. And now they're doing podcasts like you. Look who you are now. Look what you've done. Or there's the Reggie Millers, who was a complete jerk off. Yeah. And now I go up and I hug him, and he knows. They say
Reggie was a handful, huh?
Oh my gosh, Royce!
Did I give you some trouble at some pro-am games?
Oh, Royce, you were horrible too. And not only that, but Royce, you were a great player, and I knew you were a great player. And I used to talk to people. I used to say, "There's something else going on here. It ain't the game. it ain't the call that I may or may not have missed. Okay, so what? I mean, there's something else, and whether you were unhappy, frustrated, which I've come to know you. I know
Yeah.
your story now. I know
Yeah.
exactly where you're coming from, and I believe a lot of it's justified. So, but again, that doesn't mean I had to take your your shit during the game. I don't care. I'm gonna treat you the same way that I'm gonna treat these other people. In fact,
That's right.
Royce,
That's
I
right.
got to go after you. I got to go after you and LeBron and and Westbrook, because if I go after you three, what are the other 12 going to do? They're going to listen.
And
But if
fall in
I
line.
don't
Yeah.
treat you the same way and I let you get away with something and I let the 12th man on the bench, well, then I'm gutless. I'm not a rep. They're not going to respect me. And
Yeah.
I knew that. So I had to go after you, not go after you. I had to handle you because I knew if I handled the best player, then I'm going to be able to handle the 10th player. And you learn that as you get older. And I teach that to young referees now. Don't have an ego. Don't have an ego. In fact, you can hold your arms like this in front of yourself, or you can hold your arms and you drop your arms. Well, if I'm coming up to you and I'm dropping my arms, what's that say, Royce? I'm wide open, Royce. I'm open. I'm open to hearing whatever you have to say. But if I'm like this, you're thinking, well, that asshole, he doesn't want to listen to me. He's not going to listen to me. And those are the little things that you learn from just, your and so I learned, and I wasn't good at it at the beginning. I got better as I got older. I realized I was missing plays, and then I would speak to people. I got better as a play caller. I got better at handling games, and once I became better at handling games, I became a better referee.
And so now 30 years in, 20 plus years in, 30 years in, let's see, 1986, so 2000 and almost 40 years in the
Yeah,
last.
if this wouldn't have happened to me, Royce, and I intended to referee longer. If this wouldn't have happened to me, the reason I'm on your show today,
Mhm.
my goal was to get 40 years. I would have been the only referee in the history of the NBA to ever referee 40. This would have been my 39th. So I'm still considered the longest, one of the three longest tenured, but I would have been the first one to ever referee 40. And that would have been a fun goal. I mean, they can decide Roy, who works the playoffs. They can decide who makes the All-Star games. They can decide all that stuff as a player and as a referee. You know that. We're all in
Yeah.
the same, but they can't determine your longevity. The fact that you stayed healthy enough and you did your job enough and you worked 40 years, they can't take that away from me, and they wouldn't have been able to. There's only three of us that worked 5 decades. There's only three referees in the history of the world, and I'm proud of that. I'm
Yeah.
proud of the games that worked. I'm proud of the playoffs, but it doesn't define me. My faith in God, my what I stand for as a human being, as a husband, as a son. It means so much more to me than how many playoff games you referee or how many
Right.
this or that. What
Right.
I'm doing now in fighting the NBA and the situation I'm in, I'm more proud of that, Royce, than I am in the 2,000, 2,500 games I referee, whatever. I'm proud of that, but this is more important, and I'm proud of what I'm doing. But yeah, that's just
Well,
the way life,
well,
life
well,
has certain turns, and that's why we're at.
we're all proud of you, and they can never take away what you did, no matter how much they try. And that's etched in stone. Your legacy's etched in stone. Let's pivot a little bit to fast forward through the Reggie Millers and Michael Jordans and Karl Malones and championships and Tim Duncans and Pop and Phil and all of those stories. When you're in town soon, we'll get you in the studio and we'll sit
Love that.
back and shoot the breeze about some of those great epic NBA stories. But today, relevant to what we've been talking about more recently on the podcast, and why I thought it was so important to help properly frame just how influential, how impactful sports is on politics and vice versa, which is an idea that was railed against in recent years because so many professional sports institutions became woke and kind of towed the line, this woke liberal line, starting off with Kaepernick in many ways. And so the natural impulse and animus around sports and politics was, let's keep the politics out of sports. But I think your story and my story is a shining example of when politics is not only going to be in sports whether you like it or not, but we damn sure better have some people who have some righteousness and some sacred honor and some morals and principles when it comes to the politics in sports. No better example than you. Many people may not know Kenny's story or recent story, but came into controversy, huge controversy with the NBA for not accepting the vaccine mandate. And that is, I mean, it's just such an honor to be from the same neighborhood, to know you, to be distant, connected through our families and our upbringing and city of St. Paul, and to fall on the same side of the movement. And may I say, you were one of the few NBA officials to deny the vaccine, and the vaccine mandate. Walk us through that whole deal. Where are you in 2020 when the pandemic hits? What's going on in the NBA at that time? What's being said in the reffing community? What's being talked about in terms of what may be coming in the future? How does this all unravel?
Well, first of all, one thing I want to go back to what you just said. You are so right, and more people have to acknowledge the fact that pro sports have such an impact on politics, day-to-day life, people's thinking process
Mhm.
because of the amount of people that they touch. So let's start with that, and that's why probably why the best reason of why we're here today. Back in 2020, we were, I was in, I can't remember what year it was, 33, 36, whatever the hell it was. But moving around, and we all heard about this COVID, whatever. We all heard about this virus, whatever. And I'm a health nut, and my wife is a health nut, and we have a wonderful relationship. We work together on everything. We started researching early on, what is this? What is this all about? Well, the first year, Royce, they would allow we would all, well, I should say even back to 2020, all of a sudden in March of 2020, they shut the league down. I remember the date, it was March 11th, 2020. They shut the league down. My last game was in Atlanta. We all go home. We don't know what's going on. Boom, we'll let you know what's going on. It was kind of, everything was kind of up in the air. And so we're all home. The league's shut down. They heard Rudy Gobert had first gotten it, and then some other player had gotten it, and they didn't know what all was going on. So we play we do the playoffs later that same year. They do it in the bubble, and I had two tears in my left hip. Turned out I had four tears in my left hip, my labrum, and I went in and I had stem cell surgery. I didn't know when we were going to go back, if we were going to go back. I was trying to schedule it before the next season. So I scheduled it, on or about August. Well, then they decided to go to the bubble on about that time. So I did not go to the bubble. And I kind of had an idea what it was going to be all about. And I was right. And you have no idea how many people have spoke out, but they won't speak out against the NBA. They won't say anything because they were there. That's their meal ticket. But all of the, social injustice and all the racial connotations within the bubble, the Black Lives Matter, everybody was kneeling and all this. Kaepernick had just done his thing, whatever, a while previous.
Yep.
And again, I don't agree with what Mr. Kaepernick did at all. But I mean, at least he had his free speech. At least he was able to do whatever he felt was right. Do I agree with it? No, not at all. But at least he, as a human being, I would look at him today and say, I don't agree with you, but you know what? Hey, I respect the hell out of you for if that's the way you felt. So in the bubble, they were, I don't know if I want to say forcing, but they were putting a lot of pressure on everybody to kneel. Every referee knelt except five. And those, I would never have knelt. I would never have knelt in front of our American flag. You could fire me, you could do whatever you want. I will never do that. Well, they didn't have to, but there's pressure. There was all these marches and everyone had masks on and everybody had to test and everybody was testing. You couldn't leave your room and everybody was locked down. On and on and on. It was not a good experience for anybody, but the NBA got through it. And I come to realize now, who were the four people behind the bubble? The military, Disney, ESPN, and the NBA. And we'll get to that later. So didn't put all that together back then, right? But anyway, so now the next season starts later. It starts in like the end of December, and I go back to work. I'm healed, and I go back to work. I work that season, and they start testing everybody. So that season, the 21, 22, or whatever it was, everybody was tested. And they wanted you all to take the vaccine. I chose not to take the vaccine. Several of the referees chose not to take the vaccine. But in that year, coming up to, anyway, so some days, Royce, I had to test 4 times a day. 4 times a day. because I chose not to take the vaccine. It was just a little, just go,
Rapid test.
So yeah, which now we know it meant nothing either. But
Yeah, it doesn't work.
so I
Yeah.
finished that whole year, right? Went to the playoffs, finished the whole year. Now the following year, it's the 7th year of our contract. We have 1 year left. Well, they went to the NBA players and said, we're going to mandate that everyone takes the vaccine. The NBA players said, no. In fact, Michelle Roberts, the head of the Players Association, said, we're not even, I don't think she even took it to the players for a vote. Could be wrong, but that's what I've heard. They didn't vote on it. We have another year. We have 2 years left in our contract. We don't have to take a man. We're not doing it. Well, through pressures and all this other in-house and, cities and all that, a lot of the players got the vaccine. Not as many as they say. Not as many as they say. Because there was always the fake card, but I'm not going to get into that. I'm just going to let people think whatever they want. Okay. I'm not going to make any statements about that, but you know what I'm alluding to.
Right.
So well, we said, there's a lot of us that said, well, we don't want to take the vaccine. This is before the 21-22 season.
Well, before you go, I want to just let the audience understand. Okay. The best way to influence Black people, which is in and around the best way to affect electoral politics, or at least the spirit of the result of elections today, which we saw in the runoff in 2022 there in Georgia, when Raphael Warnock wins in the runoff where there was just a virtual tie. Everybody accepts it because everybody believes to fight back republicanism, conservatism, Christo-fascism, MAGA, and Donald Trump. Of course, more Black people will come out to vote for Raphael Warnock in the runoff than they did in the general, because there's this huge scare that white supremacy is afoot, and if you're not protected by an ever-expanding federal government, then you'll be the victim of this white supremacy. And Kenny would fall under that, and even Royce White would fall under that for some strange, odd, unexplainable reason. And I just give that preface to say the mainstream media went out of their way, in my opinion, to tell a narrative that the majority of NBA players were vaccinated, to sort of impress this trust in the entire vaccine narrative and in the compliance of the entire vaccine mandate narrative on anybody who sports touch. Hey, look at those athletes. Those professional athletes all took the vaccine in the interest of their job, of their corporate, their corporate duty or whatever the case may be. They trust the medicine. You should too. And if you really look through the history, sports injuries, sports medicine has always been sort of on the cutting edge culturally around medicine in general. This is the way that people use culture. This is the way that people use misinformation and propaganda to warp the American public's perspective around very pertinent issues. And what I'll say is that a lot of these athletes had the resources and had the connections to create a workaround for the vaccine by getting vaccine cards, fake vaccine cards, so on and so forth. They said it was illegal then. Now we know, wait, who's going to go in and actually – the whole vaccine narrative and the whole vaccine mandate narrative is shot. So surely nobody's going back now to check vaccine cards because those are shot as well for the time being, although the World Health Organization says that another pandemic's on the way. But anyway, I'll let you continue. I just wanted to throw that to the audience.
You're right, and the people that told me that they took a card, I would never tell the world that.
Right.
That's between me and that person. But I mean, I just know. But yes, it's always about the narrative, and it's all about the media creating a narrative, or the NBA, or the NFL, or the Major League Baseball creating the narrative, because so many people watch those 3-4 conglomerates. If you want to throw in the National Hockey League, whatever. So in the summer of that before the 21-22 season, they come to us and they say, well, to our union, and our union is so weak. It's the weakest union in the history of the world. And the executive board wants to do whatever the NBA wants them to do. And I'm not afraid to admit it. I'm saying it out loud. I know the 6 of them, who they are, and the legal, the attorney that represents them. And it's all, so they come to the group and say, well, we're going to redo the last year of the contract. And in the last year of the contract, you have to take the vaccine or you can't work. So all the union would have had to do, Royce, 2 weeks before the season, is say, we aren't redoing our contract. We've got 1 year left on that contract. We're not redoing the contract. And there's 2 weeks. We're just going to If they choose to take the vaccine, fine. That's a civil liberty that they should be allowed, and we're going to move forward, just like the players.
Mm.
But they didn't. They said, no, we're going to put it in the contract. It was voted in 56-17. Don't quote me. I mean, it was crazy. 17 people voted against it. Of course, I was one of them. I thought it was horrible. Now you have to take the vaccine or you can't work that 21-22 season. So it was, I go, well, now what am I going to do? You sit down, you talk to your wife. And it was an easy decision for me, Royce. Sure, now a year and a half, 2 years later, we see what's in that vaccine. We see that it never stopped any spread. We see that it didn't do anybody one bit of good. We know it was a bioweapon. We know all that. But back then, I don't believe in abortion. I'm pro-life. I don't believe in mRNA changing someone's DNA. I believe this is how we were created as a human being. And I believe it's God's design. That's it. So it was easy for my wife, Danny, and I to just say, I'm sorry, this is against our religious beliefs. I'm never going to take this. Well, then they offer people a religious and or medical exemption. And so I filed both because I had already had COVID and I was fine. My wife and I had COVID. It was like, ask me if food poisoning was more tough on me than the COVID. Yes, it was. So it was just a difficult flu. Was I sick for a few days? Yes, I was sick. So anyway, they denied both. Long story short, they denied my religious exemption and they denied my medical exemption. Then they said you can go through an arbitration process. Well, the arbitration process, Royce, was, and one of our members tried to do that, he lost naturally, is that there's going to be someone from the executive board, someone from the NBA office, and then we're going to hire a neutral arbitrator. Well, guess who paid for the neutral arbitrator? The NBA. Guess how the neutral arbitrator ruled? With the NBA. So that person lost. Leroy Richardson, a good friend of mine, wonderful man, wonderful referee, military veteran, great guy, great human being. He lost. And they said that they never denied his religious beliefs to be insincere. And they still denied it. He'll be in our courtroom. He'll be there when we go to trial. He'll be right there. So he lost. So it started at 11, then it went 8, then it came down to 4. There was 4 referees. One of them was someone from management, Jason Phillips, who used to be a successful veteran NBA referee, playoff referee, finals referee. He was the head of the replay center. Mark Hyatt from Phoenix, myself, and a young man by the name of David Walker, who was a minor league referee. All because of our religious faith. We filed all religious exemptions. They denied them all. We all got the same lawyer. David couldn't because he was a minor league referee. But the 3 of us hired a magnificent, wonderful human being. His name is Sheldon Karasik. He's a wonderful lawyer from out east. And he took us, the 3 of us on, part of the frontline doctors, frontline lawyers. He's one of those. And we're fighting him in federal court. We started with the EOC. And after having it there, Royce, almost a year, we find out that the EOC was not ruling on any cases. They were shoving them underneath the desk and hoping everybody went away. We don't want to rule on this because if they rule on it, at that time, what's going to happen? It's going to open up the floodgates, right? So then we filed a writ to sue. We were granted that within 30 days. November, December of last year, we filed we're in federal court right now and we're moving forward. I'm not going to talk to you much about the case. I will talk to you later on. You will be one of my first people. I'd love to share it with you, but it's moving forward well for us. And I'm looking forward to hearing what the NBA, if they don't deny our religious beliefs, then why did you deny it? There was some other alternative. Well, it's constitutionally, unlawful for you to deny someone's religious beliefs. That's against our Constitution, Royce. You know that. And so the mandate first of all, it was a mandate for an illegal, it was a non-FDA approved vaccine. Now there's so much I've learned, Royce. The NBA's involvement with the military. I've learned so much since we filed this that it's amazing. And that's leading to how I feel about my employer, who I loved and respected for almost 40 years. I mean, over 40 years with the minors. And now, I've got all these years and we just, because I chose not to put something in my arm, now all of a sudden I'm this bad man, I'm this rebel, I'm this conspiracy theorist, I'm all the things that you've heard, I've heard, we've all lived it together. Yep. And so that's the long story short. I probably missed a little, but we're in federal court, we're moving forward. We're going to find out what all of them have to say in depositions. We're going to take them all into the courtroom and we're going to have them answer. And I've got some of the biggest doctors in the world, Dr. McCullough and Dr. Cole and Dr. Corey and I've all met them at Great Awakening. I've met them at different functions I've been part of. They're all willing to come to the courtroom, and they're willing to testify just what this vaccine was all about and religious beliefs. And so my wife and I, it's been a tough 2 years, Royce. It's been real tough. But you know what? Our faith in our Lord Jesus Christ, I mean, people, if you have a faith in God, this is so much easier. If you have a faith in God, it will lead you to your beliefs. God is truth. God is right. So I know how to react to the vaccine. I know how to react to transgender. I know how to react to racism. I know how to react because I know what is right, what is good, what is evil.
Yeah.
So it's been, my faith is stronger. My love for my wife couldn't be stronger. She's my love of my life. So I love Danny, and I want you to meet her. But so we're fighting this thing, Royce, and we're going to win. I've already won, Royce. I've already won. You know what that means?
Yep.
People don't, but I do. I'd like to stop the NBA from doing this. We've heard, Royce, listen to this. There's, as of last June, I think it was June, don't correct me on the date, the commissioner said there's no more mandates. There's no more mandates. There's no more vaccines. There's no more anything. Yet, the three of us have to take the vaccine to return to work. And when you want to explain that to me, Royce, please call me. I'd love to hear from you. That's one of their, it's just.
This is Adam Silver.
Well, we think it is. I mean, he's on the deposition list. We think it is. We want to hear what he has to say.
Right now, is the ruling coming down from the head of officials? Or is it coming down from the right now? Is the ruling coming down from the head of officials, or is it from the league office, or is it from the board of governors? And most people don't know that there's a board of governors over top of the league office.
Of course.
And they don't know that the board of governors is the old guard owners who are, rotate on a rotating, whatever, the little carousel.
We really don't know. That's a good question. That's why,
who's running the NBA, right?
Well, I think Mr. Silver is, I think. And so I would think everything comes from him, but they're so back and forth on all these answers.
But the thing is, and let's get into it. I want people to understand in the audience how significant this case is. I still don't really think that conservative media across the country has given the proper attention and visibility to your case. It's a monumental case, and it's monumental for.
I would wish they would, Royce. That's why I'm so grateful to people like you and Jason Whitlock, David Whitehead from Flyover, Pastor Dave, all these, Amy Voss from Project Bears. All these people have wanted to, just like you, but nobody. I'd love to do an article with the New York Post. I'd love to tell them the story. I'd love to tell these people the story.
Well, they won't. They see, and this is what I'm saying. And I stress to you guys, and Kenny, I'm sharing this with you for the first time or in real time. This is a monumental case because it's the convergence of multiple political, corporate, financial interests that otherwise people don't connect the dots on. The NBA is a watering hole for a global corporate community, although it keeps itself very neutral when it comes to politics for the most part. Now, the woke politics are all a part of their liberal, mainstream narrative. That's not really political. It has a political feeling to it to those who oppose those politics. But for the mainstream world, the people that stop by after work, grab a hamburger and fries. My grandma used to go and she used to eat a hamburger with extra pickles. That was in a Diet Coke. She lived to be 70. She's 76 now, so we're happy to still have her eating like that every day. But anyway, the people who get their life, their daily life, their worldview with their French fries, most of those people do not associate the NBA as a political institution at the level that it really is behind the scenes. And what I try and tell people all the time, and I'll tell you this, is telling you this as well in real time. The people who run the NBA are the same people who run DC. They're the same people who run Wall Street. They're the same people who run Davos, Switzerland. I mean, the NBA is just really far down the trough. You got to think, if I run a king, let's go back to the Roman Empire. Do you think the people who ran the Colosseum, who oversaw the Colosseum, had a really high role in the Roman Empire? No, of course they didn't have a really high role. They were notable. They were people who were important because they were charged with keeping the people distracted from more important issues. And they would use people like Kenny, like the players, like the coaches, like all the brilliance and talent and preparation that goes into a NBA playoff game, like you'll see later on that you'll see in the coming week, the NBA Finals. All of that preparation, all of the man hours, all of the work, all of the youth coaches that brought these young players up and helped develop their character and their craft. They'll use all of that to distract you from what's really important. Kenny's case is a case where that distraction runs the danger of merging with the very narrative they don't want you to look at. And that's why the New York Post and even some of your more conservative media, like a Fox News, I'm just going to say it, like a Fox News, they don't want any part of Kenny's case, even when it would seem advantageous for them to throw down on a very Democrat-leaning sports institution. They don't want to run up against Kenny's case and talk about it because it puts it puts the red dot right over the bullseye in what we're really facing. So again, tell me now, you're talking about behind the scenes. And again, I'm saying when we say who runs the NBA, it's like who really does run the NBA? We don't know. But so you mean to tell me that still to this day, they are making the claim that you have to get vaccinated in order to come back, even though the vaccine mandates have been lifted officially by the league and the commissioner?
Yes. Everything you said, I do agree with. I was so unfamiliar with the extent of what you're saying. You're much more in tune and knowledgeable about what you're saying. But these are some of the things we're finding out, and I found out in the last year and a half. I mean, first of all, let's go back to the bubble. I mean, they believe in equality. They believe in social justice. They believe in freedom of speech. That's why you and have gotten into their dealings with China, and I'm not going to go. Well, I can't. I'm not going to go there. But all of that. Well, then what about my freedom of speech? What about my freedom of choice? What of my decision to not take a vaccine, not put something in my arm? Why is it? And again, my reason was my religious beliefs. I'm more mad at them for anything. Is that the belief on faith? Do any of them have any faith? Because if you have a faith in God, how dare you question my religious beliefs? I mean, there's a lot of, whether you be Jewish or Muslim or Protestant or Catholic or whatever, that's fine. I mean, everybody should be allowed to practice their religious faith. And for you to tell me that I can't, or that mine does not mean anything, or I'm wrong, or what Royce, we're going to find out just what their stance is, because we really don't know, because they've stated ambiguously that no, we never denied that they had their beliefs were, their religious beliefs were insincere. We don't deny that. Well, then why are we here? So
I'll say I'll make a claim. I know there's some things you can't really make a claim about definitively, but I'll make the claim. What they're saying is your religious beliefs are not a constitutional right. No, I'll tell you what they're saying first. First, what they're saying is the same thing they told me behind closed doors. The collective bargaining agreement supersedes the American with Disabilities Act. The American,
oh, really?
the collective bargaining agreement supersedes constitutional law. This is why
Really?
people like me and others in the America First movement have come to talk about the governance we live under as a corporatocracy. And in many ways, many of our corrupt, snake, gutless, feckless DC elites, whether it be elected officials or administrative state, they have allowed many, many corporations to supersede the United States Constitution and the lawful rights of our citizens for reasons that are all but so obvious. They're on the take. They're getting paid. And the NBA is no different. And they live in a world, this is the true mantra of globalism. I mean, we talk about globalism, people go, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. No, this is the mantra of globalism. A globalist has no allegiance to his nation, or if he does, it's a very loose allegiance to his nation. His allegiance is to free trade, free market enterprise, international relations, global connectivity, all of these woke, all money. I mean, it's money. And so they think that when they collectively bargain, that supersedes any jurisdiction of any court here in America, including the Supreme Court?
Well, you know what? I'm certainly not going to say you're wrong because we're feeling that, and that's what we're because if you cannot deny a religious belief, then why did you deny the religious exemption? Another point of interest is if you really believe that it was all about safety and health, right? Isn't that what this is about? Come on, this is all about safety and health, right?
Yep.
Then
Yep.
why didn't you mandate the players? Just answer that question. It's all about safety and health. Why didn't you mandate the players? Think about one
So
man
wait
in
a minute.
Houston.
So the players. So let me get this right, because a lot of people remember the huge controversy with. Well, now they won't remember the Kyrie Irving controversy, maybe because there was more controversy after the fact that in and around had to do with freedom of speech and faith. I'm just saying. I'm not going to go into it here, but the original controversy with Kyrie Irving after the flat Earth, spectacle, that was just more for the WWE style news headlines. But the real controversy in Kyrie Irving's career was that he also denied the vaccine, and the NBA did a great job of propagandizing a narrative that suggested that the vaccines were mandated by the city. And this is where, again, corporatocracy, this is where your politics and sports collide. The sports institutions, how do they go get their arena money? They go to their local mayor. They go to their local stakeholders, their interlocutors, as Joe Biden would call it, in the community that have, a vested interest, a car dealership that has a vested interest in the success of the organization. And those are the people that start to form the community of that local organization that will hold in place the overall politics of the NBA and then the bigger, broader global initiative through one common financial interest. And so when it was Kyrie Irving, it was what was my guy's name? Who was the mayor at the time? The guy who did the cheeseburger vaccine ad. De Blasio, Mayor De Blasio.
Yeah. Alex
Okay.
Adams, De Blasio.
So then the NBA goes, well, De Blasio is the one who's mandating the vaccine. But the NBA never tried to fight the city of New York. And Adam Silver and Adam Silver's dad, Daddy Silver, was one of the most respected attorneys in New York City. Okay, Prokshire and Rowe is one of the most respected law firms in all of New York City. The entire NBA office is nothing but lawyers. Anything the NBA wants to fight, and you know this, anything that the NBA wants to fight legally, like a referee who wants to, have his religious beliefs, if they want to fight you, they will fight you. They will bully you. They will try and squeeze you and intimidate you through money by saying, hey, we got lawyers and as many hours as we need until we win. We're going to make you spend more money than you actually have. We have infinite money. It's the same way the federal government works. It's the same thing when you try and investigate or challenge the federal government. This is how sports and politics collide. So they try to write the narrative that all of the players were forced to be vaccinated, but they weren't. And you're saying the reason they weren't is because the union on day one told them to go kick rocks, and they bent to that.
The union, the NBA, well, here, better yet, the NBA Players Association, Royce, never mandated the vaccine. The NFL Players Association never mandated the vaccine. Major League Baseball Players Association never mandated the vaccine. NFL referees never were mandated to take the vaccine. Major League Baseball umpires were never mandated to take the vaccine. Only NBA referees.
Oh, so they're the sine qua non. They're the quintessential sellout in the group.
Well, I mean, they're never going to admit that. They're thinking it was safety. It was all about health and safety and all about health. And that's what they're all going to come back to.
So your union, your NBA refs union, is the only union in professional sports to mandate that the refs get vaccinated.
I don't know about hockey referees, and I don't know about hockey players, but of the other three majors, that's correct.
Wow. Okay. Got it.
So, but again, I mean, it could have been handled differently. It wasn't. That's all true. That's all factual. Everything you're saying about the NBA lawyers, we're experiencing that in the last year and a half, Royce. You are right on. I mean, that's exactly what they're doing. They, in fact, the other day, and I'm allowed to talk about this. They don't want me talking about anything directly pertaining to the case, which is fine. I won't. But I can talk about this because we haven't filed the lawsuit yet. We're filing. Is that they're denying me my pension. Now, my severance, they're denying because I have to sign a waiver or something that I won't, well, naturally, I'm not going to sign that waiver because I'm suing them. But the pension is mine. I was officially terminated. I filled out the 6 weeks of the paperwork. I was supposed to have my pension wired to me into my Fidelity fund on March 1st, and they just denied it, and they're denying it for, according to my lawyer, extreme, ambiguous, ridiculous reasons, and it's illegal. And now that's the second lawsuit I have because, and and I know you're a brilliant guy. Why do you think they don't want me to have my pension money? Because they don't want me to what? Have the money to continue to fight them. So, that's just, I'm so disappointed in them, the way that they handled that. And again, they sent me an email at 3:30 in the afternoon on March 1st saying the pension committee has decided not to give you your pension. And
the pension committee, huh?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, who's the pension committee?
Well, I don't even know who they were. The guy signed it at the bottom, and there's 3 people I don't even know, but I'm sure it's directly affiliated with the NBA. Somebody told the NBA NFL administrator to not release it, otherwise he would have released it. So we're finding out all that. That just happened in the last, and then there was a 60-day investigation period of which they ruled the exact same way we knew they would. So this has all happened in the last week, and so now I'm going after them for my pension because it's naturally it's tough with now. You can't get a loan, you don't have a job, you can't you tried to go get work when the COVID. It was very difficult to get work when COVID because nobody was hiring. So it's been a tough, but again, you get it. You know where I stand. I don't have to explain it anymore about. I'm never going to give up. I'm going to continue to. If we go into a courtroom, great. We're going to go into the courtroom, and a lot of the same questions that you're bringing up or statements that you're making, we're going to get to the bottom of it. I met Bobby Kennedy at a Jason Whitlock interview, long before we filed the amended complaint, and he's the first one who told me. I knew Dr. McCullough had mentioned it back in December, but hey, this is a bioweapon. It was created by our own Department of Defense. It was then put to Pfizer, Moderna, and well, again, I come back to the bubble. Who was involved in the bubble? Military, Disney, the NBA.
Now, talk a little bit about that if you can. I'm not familiar with the military being involved in the bubble, but enlighten me on this.
Well, what we're trying to put it all together now is that, and again, it's my lawyer's magnificent at this is we filed an amended complaint a while ago, and I can't talk to you about it, but my lawyer has come up with all this. But again, it was public record back McCullough, and of course Bobby Kennedy said it, that everybody thinks that Pfizer, Moderna created this vaccine. Well, they didn't. Our military, our DoD created this vaccine.
Well, yeah, the DoD was put in charge of the vaccine on day one. Now,
and who paid for it? You and I. Our tax dollars paid for it.
Of course.
Then they take it over. They take it over to Pfizer, Moderna. They put their label on it. They actually run it through their factories, and then they make billions and billions of dollars. And then again, this is our opinion. We haven't proven this yet. We hope to. Is that kickbacks are? Where do you think the kickbacks went to? You think Pfizer took that whole $90 billion last year? Or do you think they kicked it back to who?
The NBA?
Maybe. I don't know. We don't know.
Well, the NBA. Well, Pfizer. Well, look, Pfizer. First off, Pfizer's neck deep in professional sports and all of mainstream media. Anyway, that's just there didn't have to be a special allocation of funds set aside particular to the vaccine when it comes to the bubble or the NBA, because the NBA and Pfizer and the whole apparatus is already connected at the hip. The entire medical industrial complex, insurance. Look at who the sponsors are of the NBA. What's the group there, and what's the group, the health group for the NBA? The name escapes me right now, but they're all connected. United Health Group, all of them. They're all.
That's what we're finding out now. Again, I go back a year and a half ago when I filed the religious exemption and the medical exemption. This was all. It was out there. We weren't aware of it yet. It had already been prevalent. It had already been prevalent with people who were in the know, but we didn't know. I filed it because of my religious beliefs. I filed it because I'm never going to take this. It was like, again, I come back and I keep saying it. Very simple for me. It was really very simple. Now, as we get into it, a year and a half later, we're finding out all these things that were involved in this whole process. Why did Mr. Silver say there will never be a mandate? Then he says there will be a mandate. Now he says there's no mandate. Why? Well, we'll just have to have him answer that when he comes to do his deposition. We'll just have to He can explain all that. Why all of a sudden he changes back and forth? Why, if it was, again, we keep coming back to, this one man at the table in Houston. He used to be the scorekeeper. He chose not to take the vaccine, and he was terminated. I mean, he wasn't allowed to work at the Houston table.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, Kenny, you know what I found difficult and I could never understand? I think it's so unfair. I said, what's that? He said, why is it that every fan that comes in the door has to be mandated to take the vaccine? Why is it that the announcers and the scorekeepers have to be mandated to take the vaccine? Why is it the referees have to be mandated to take the vaccine, but the players don't? Why is it that everybody in that NBA arena has to protect the product, but the product doesn't have to protect us? Why is that? Well, that's a good question, isn't it? I mean, think about it. I mean, why? Because if you shut down the players, there's no game, and then there's no what? There's no money.
No money.
Money.
Well, another good thing to look at would be, do any of the NBA owners were they ever mandated? Did they ever mandate themselves to get vaccinated?
I don't know. And it's
I would venture to guess. I know the answer. The answer is, of course not. The rules are for thee and not for me.
But it's all going to come back to the religious beliefs, the religious exemption. Did you allow any? If you did, why? Why didn't you allow these three men? Especially if you think that their religious beliefs are sincere. Tell me what's going on here. You hit it. I mean, they're very vague. They don't want to answer this. They don't want to do this. They want to prolong. We're moving forward. It's moving forward. Again, I can't talk about the case, but it's moving forward.
So, did you grow up Catholic? Were you in?
I was a Catholic my whole life, born Catholic. I've been baptized naturally, but I've learned a little bit about the Catholic religion. I've learned, there are bad people in every religion. I mean, we're all human beings. I mean, I don't agree with the Pope's stance back in 1944 when there were 6 million Jews that were killed in World War II, and the Vatican knew about it and they didn't do a damn thing. So I'm not really too keen on the Pope's stance there. Are you? I'm not too keen on the Pope's stance in the 80s when all these wonderful young children, these young men were being, abused by priests.
I'm not keen on the Pope's stance right now today.
Well, let
alone in 1944.
Well, I was getting to that. My point is that you don't agree in 1944.
Yeah.
You don't agree in 1980 when the Pope in 1980 turned his back on all these wonderful. So what my point is that I can be a Catholic, I can be a Christian, and not necessarily have to agree with the Pope's stance. And I don't agree with this Pope either. But that's my whole point. We were interviewed, and I tried to tell the NBA office, wait a minute, I can have a.
Oh, so wait. Let me remind people in the audience of this, because what the NBA tried to use as an excuse as to why they denied your religious exemption is because the Pope supported the vaccine, and thus all Catholics should follow along with the Pope's recommendation, or they are not in accordance with the faith. That's what happened. That's
right. But if you ever looked at the whole quote, I used to have it. I don't have it in front of me here. But the whole quote, he doesn't really. From a moral standpoint, he rules one way, but he says it still should be up to the individual. I mean, if you take the whole quote, it's again, everybody that wants to be, push the Pope's agenda only took a part of that quote. But you're right. That's exactly what people think.
Well, but first, I'm just going to say for myself, it's insincere from the outset for a bunch of anti-Jews to make a broad scope ruling on how Catholics identify or don't identify or aren't in accordance with the faith when they don't believe in God in the most general sense. And they certainly don't believe in the freedom of religion in the most general sense. There's an open attack on Christians and there's an open attack on Catholics, and they'll use the Pope to do it. And it would seem to many within the Catholic Church, many Catholics around the world, that they are using the Vatican to wage this war against Christ, and they've been doing it for a long time. You mentioned a few key points. The good Tim Gordon from the Rules from Retrograde podcast. People like Taylor Marshall talk about the deep church all the time. We hope to get the great Archbishop Vigano on the podcast, who's also been outspoken on many of these corrupt issues. I mean, he won't even call the Pope the Pope. He won't even say His Holiness. He calls him the Argentine. And he's been very critical. So my point is, it just is. Right. It's so hypocritical, it's not even just hypocritical. It's really flippant and kind of catty and bitchy for them to say, well, the Pope says so that means you're you're not a Catholic then if you don't follow the Pope. First of all, the church is not the Pope's church. The church is the church of Christ, okay? The Pope is the vicar of Christ. But the Pope is still a man, and he's still a man who is bound by free will and has the choice to either follow in God's will, follow the will of Christ, or not. So the Pope can be wrong, and we've seen many popes throughout history be wrong, and many Catholic theologians would affirm that the Pope and his recommendations are not the be-all, end-all of Catholicism or the Catholic faith. They are a strong and very respected, the most highly respected recommendation from the hierarchy of the church, but it is not the be-all, end-all. If the Pope tells me to go and murder children, that is not a legitimate recommendation from the vicar. And Catholics got to get straight about this. But it's even besides that, it's just flippant for them to try and use that to deny your religious exemption. It's like, you guys don't believe in God, so you don't get to adjudicate what makes somebody a Catholic or not. Give me a break.
It's real simple, Royce. You follow God. You don't follow man. It's real simple. And the Pope is a man. You follow God. You don't follow man. It's real simple. And again, you may respect or not respect the Pope or whatever, but that's everyone's personal belief. I mean, you're not going to tell me how to practice. I mean, someone could be an atheist. Someone could be whatever, like I said this earlier, whatever they choose to be. And you and I and the NBA and everybody has to respect someone's Christian, Catholic, or whatever beliefs. Because, and in our case, you're in my case, we follow our Lord Jesus Christ. We follow God. We don't follow man, and we don't follow the Pope. And so, again, if that's what they want to hang their hat on, they're going to lose that one, and that's okay. And I have reasons why I stated why I believe, why I'm a Christian, and maybe they find it difficult that a referee who blows his whistle or calls technical fouls can't be a man of Christ. Well, that's tough. It is possible, and it's true. And so again, all these things that have come over the last couple of years, Royce, it's created a narrative was totally the opposite of the narrative everyone tried to create. I mean, again, remember, we were pariahs. We were horrible people. We didn't take the vaccine. We were spreading the vaccine. I mean, all these things that have now, and it wasn't that the CDC and the NIH are now changing their beliefs. It was always their beliefs. They just never allowed us to read page 185. We all were reading page 1 through 5, and everybody was running with that. Now they said the same thing back then. We just never got that far down the road. So how many people were infected? How many people suffered? How many people have died? But again, I'm going to say it again, and the last time I'll say it. That is all something we've learned in the last year and a half. Why did Kenny Maurer 2 years ago file his denial? Well, I filed my denial under my religious beliefs. I'm not going to take it because of X, Y, Z. That I filed it because of my religious beliefs. Everything else in this world is secondary. You know that. Right. So I'm very happy with it, and I never wanted to go out this way. I want my job back. I never wanted to stop. I wanted to referee for a few more years. I had things I wanted to do, things I wanted to accomplish. I don't know what my reputation is like. It doesn't bother me to the extent that I'm not, I'm secure with myself. But some people, what they think, I don't care what people think on one hand. But so it's difficult. There's a lot of things I still wanted to do. They prevented me from doing that, and I'm going to hear why. Royce. I'm going to take them all the way if I have to, and I'm going to find out why.
Well, I remember when we first chatted a while back, and you were more. I could tell that you were more disappointed than anything, and it's people. I think people should understand. You're not the martyr type, right? It's just, you're willing to stand up for what you believe, but you didn't go out seeking this out. I mean, it's just the most reasonable and rational thing to say, hey, listen, under my religious beliefs, I don't want to do this. And it's so indicative of where we've come in this country that the NBA goes out of its way to bend to the church of LGBTQ, which they 100% do. They bend to the church of LGBTQ ad nauseum, and a referee can't deny a vaccine mandate under a religious exemption, and then to use the Pope and to use the church to do it. And again, I take great exception with that because I think the Pope. I would hope that I hope you wrote or will write a letter to the Pope or to some Catholic publications and let them know that the Pope's position on the vaccine and the vaccine mandate is being wielded against Catholics around the world. Is primarily by
Know that? Don't you think they know that by now? I think
Well,
I
I
would
think
think.
they know it. I think they know it, but it's still good to go on the record. I would love to see an op-ed. I would love to see an open letter from Kenny Maurer to the Pope and say, "Here, I'm just His Holiness, grand up on the throne there in the Vatican. I know I'm small in your world, right? And even an illustrious career of a Hall of Fame NBA ref is small under the shadow of the Vatican, right? I mean, all of us are. It's a grand, grand institution. 2,000 years. Nobody can deny that. But here I am being bullied by the NBA, which is led by people who don't even believe in God. Let's just be honest. They don't believe in God. Okay. None of them. None of them believe in God. And they're on the record and saying they don't believe in God. And if not, then all of their affiliations, their corporate affiliations, surely suggest that they don't believe in God or don't respect religion. If not, their ruling against you shows it a third and fourth time. I'm being bullied for the things that you've said as the leader of the church. And you probably won't get a response, and it probably will change nothing. But we have to start to go on the record, and I'm that's why I'm so interested in the outcome of your case, because it's definitely going to have the establishment either be on the record and say what the real deal is, or they're going to try and dismiss the case in some grand fashion that would all but surely shed light on the corruption. Which again, none of this would surprise us, right, Kenny? I mean, those of us like me and Bobby Kennedy, who had his uncle's head blown off by Sirhan Sirhan. I mean, what kind of spooky security state name is that? None of this would surprise us, and we're happy that people like you, who have just gone about your business, put your nose down, try to live the American dream, work hard, stay loyal to the companies and the people that you build relationships with, and just do your job. We're happy that some of you now are starting to see, even though it's under these most unfortunate circumstances.
Well, Royce, I want to say also, um, I'm not bitter. I don't want to be a bitter, angry, human being. I'm going to enjoy the rest of my life with my beautiful wife and my families and friends and stuff. But and I don't even want to be angry, although I do go to bed some nights angry. I won't lie about that, but I'm just disappointed.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed that I don't think I'm a naive person. I'm somewhat worldly. I mean, I've been around a little bit, but I'm just disappointed that a company that I had so much respect for, and that I worked for, and that I tried to be a poster child for, that I tried to, just do my job and go into a referee and leave, and now you find out that you've been terminated from your employment because of a religious belief, or because you don't think I'm religious, or whatever. We're going to find out what their reason is. I just think that, I mean, that's sad. That is really, and it's happening all over. It's happening all over our world. Don't get me wrong. Kenny Maurer is not the only one that's, oh, poor Kenny Maurer. No, no, no. When I go speak, Royce, and that's why I'm with you today. I want people to say, this has happened to an NBA person. It's happened to a truck drivers, school teachers, it's social workers. It's happened to people, healthcare. It's happened to people all over the world that have lost their business. I'm one of millions, hundreds of thousands of people. That's why I'm here with you today. And you know that.
Yeah.
This isn't about, oh, I want to look important or create a narrative, or I don't want to bang the NBA. I'm not here to do that. I'm
Right.
just here to set the record straight that this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And it's happened to a lot of people. And we've got to stop this. This cannot happen again. And if people think this was the only time, that this isn't going to happen again, or this wasn't just the beginning, well, then, I tell people now, there's so much out there to educate people, Royce. 2 years ago, maybe not. Maybe you and I got on the forefront and we were not smart enough. We were just stubborn enough to find out the real
Yep.
truth, whatever you want to call it.
Stubborn.
But
Stubborn.
but
Fine. Yeah.
but now, Royce, 2 years later, people are
It's all
ignorant.
coming out. It's all coming
If
out.
people don't get it now, it's a form of ignorance. if you don't understand what racism means by now, you're ignorant. I mean, it's just beyond me that people don't. And again, there are people that are still in denial. There are people that, Royce, one other statement I want to make, and again, we'll probably subpoena or probably depose somebody from the NBA office to prove this, but I'd heard this from other NBA referees. But after vaccinated and or boosted, I think all of them were boosted, but don't quote me on that. But after vaccine, once, twice, and or boosted, but definitely after vaccine, once or twice, 65 of 73 referees still got COVID and missed assignments during the 2021 season. 21-22 season.
After being vaxxed once, twice.
Yes. So I try to tell people that. Tell me what good the vaccine did after all of my fellow referees. I was suspended at that time. I wasn't working. So there was 72, 73 referees, whatever.
Did you end up getting COVID?
Oh, hell yeah. I got COVID. Yeah. I'm fine. I think I told you earlier. I mean, I've had the flu. I've had worse with the flu, and I've had worse. I got food poisoning one time, thought I was going to die. I mean, those were a heck of a lot worse than the COVID. Now, was I weak? Did I cough a lot? Was I really tired? Yes, was I sick for a week? Yes, I was. And then I was fine. So, I mean, it's like what happened to many people. I mean, like I say, 2018, 48,000 people died from the flu.
Yeah.
So it's going to happen. People are going to suffer and die from pneumonia, the flu, whatever. Yeah. But the measures that they took, and again, I was willing to still test. I won't test ever again. Now that I found out what the test is about, I didn't know that a year and a half ago. Now we know. But I mean, I was willing to test. I was willing to do whatever they wanted me to do to keep my job, to earn a living. And it was okay the first year, but the second year, nope, we're not going to allow that anymore. And I don't know why.
Well, the great Kenny Mauer, we appreciate your time today, brother. We appreciate you sharing your story. Again, I want to impress upon the audience the importance and significance of this case, even though Kenny is so humble and being great about it. This is the convergence of corporate, financial, and political interests, and one of the greatest arenas in the world, one of the greatest spectacles ever created by man in the NBA and professional sports, but specifically the NBA, and their attempt to bully one of the most tenured people in their entire organization, I would say. I mean, you were there long before Adam Silver was around, and even probably in the early stages of David Stern's takeover, who is now no longer with us, but has certainly been there longer than many of the new owners that have taken over in the last 10 to 15 years. So it's terrible to see institutions bend to fear, corruption, woke politics, or whatever corrupt political agenda is out there, and treat people who have given a lifetime to their organization and sport. But it's a sign of more to come from these people who really have no sacred honor. And even more importantly, I think for me, is they have no national honor. It's completely un-American to treat a Kenny Mauer the way the NBA has treated you. And we hope you'll come back on and get here in person when you're in town, and we can shoot the breeze about some more lighthearted stuff, but get an update on where you are with this fight. And we hope that the rest of conservative media really takes a hold of this story and gives you the platform to talk about how significant it is. It highlights all the contradictions.
Well, I hope I want to thank you, and I hope you keep going and keep pushing the word that you are. I'm proud of you, and I don't want to sound like your father, although I probably could be. I'm older than you, but I'm proud of what you're doing, and I do follow you, as you well know. So we will do that. But I wanted to read you something. It's going to take about 30 seconds.
Please.
And we'll close out by saying this. But this is something that I'm very proud of, and I put together with a young referee on the staff, and I like to read it, and I've almost got it memorized, but I want to make sure I do it justice. But the American way at its core has always been about valuing freedom above and beyond personal safety. World War II, Civil War, Revolutionary War, even the Pilgrims leaving England, they valued religious freedom above and beyond the personal safety of their dangerous voyage across the Atlantic Ocean. You don't have to look hard to find just the opposite in America today, particularly throughout this pandemic. We claim to be Americans, yet are found trading away our freedoms left and right for the facade of personal safety. It's anti-American and completely opposite of the courage that has made our country so great. At the end of the day, all we have is our beliefs. That's the only thing we can take from us when we die. I'd rather be a martyr for my beliefs than a celebrated convert of someone else's. So
Beautiful.
that's the way I live my life. I believe you do too, and that's why I'm a friend of yours.
Beautiful. Amen to that, brother. Well, the fight continues. We appreciate you. Godspeed. Let's talk soon.
Yes, we will, Royce. Thanks a lot. God bless you. Thanks.